Welcome back. On Monday, the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation will be commemorating the 30th anniversary of the passing of Oliver Tambo with a screening of O.R. Tambo, the jewel in our crown. Tambo is the longest-serving president of the ANC, having led the party in exile from 1967 to 1991. He died on the 24th of April 1993, 14 days after SA Communist Party leader Chris Hani was assassinated. Let's watch the documentary trailer before we speak about Monday's event with the Foundation's acting CEO, Natasha Allie.
You have 12 million people in South Africa who are treated as if they were subhumans. We don't want this status. We are rejecting it entirely. And we want to be liberated, or to liberate ourselves. If nobody will do that, we will liberate ourselves so that in South Africa, I should feel that I'm a human being in that country. And I don't feel so now at all. I feel I'm a stranger, a foreigner, and at best, an animal in South Africa. This is how I feel.
The strength of his speaking came from the clarity of the thought and the deep, honest integrity that lay at the heart of everything that he said.
Everybody knows that his role was absolutely critical. Nobody else could have done it.
He was a man of peace. He wasn't a man of war.
You know, they say history is written by the victors. In South Africa, we haven't written our history. The memory of Tambo should really be cherished.
He was a towering figure that activists like me looked up to, worshipped.
He had great intellect, but he was also very down to earth, very simple, very humble.
Oliver is the greatest of the great.
One of the greatest presidents the ANC had, definitely. One of the greatest presidents the ANC had. And I think with time, both the ANC and the people of South Africa will begin to appreciate that.
It became clear across the world that this was a man of integrity, dedicated, giving his life for the freedom of his people, and also somebody who was deeply religious. That was very reassuring to a lot of people in the Western countries. He wasn't a communist.
He was respected because of his brilliant mind. When he presented at the United Nations, Africa felt proud. Independent Africa felt that's our leader. He was a supreme diplomat.
Oliver Tambo was the father of the ANC for 30 or more years. There are not many people that can be trusted and faithful for 30 years.
I'm insisting that with regard to all of these strategic interventions which made the 1994 democratic victory possible, we had Oliver Tambo as a decisive, leading, and defining player. And for this reason, I have no hesitation to convey my heartfelt view to Oliver Tambo that we should bestow the title, the father of South Africa's democracy.
You can't help but not choke up, right? When you watch that and when you watch and listen to everything that was said about Oliver Tambo. Before we get into who he was, I want us to speak about, and thank you for joining us, I want us to speak about the importance of this documentary, this movie screening, and why it's important to commemorate a giant like Oliver Tambo.
Like you're saying, you know, watching it, it's so moving, and I've seen the film so many times, but every time I watch it, I can't help but be hit with, there's so many people in the movie that aren't with us, and even just from the last 2 years, you know, Archbishop Tutu is, and with us Frini Janwala is, and with us Lindy Mabuza is, we're losing so many people who not only knew OR, but who were in themselves of the highest caliber of South Africans. So I think in commemorating days, be it the 30th anniversary or the 19th anniversary, it's just important because so many people gave their lives and sacrificed for the liberation of the country. And celebrating or commemorating days like that, it's honoring them, it's honoring their lives, it's honoring their sacrifices, and it shows us that this is where we come from and this is what we should learn from and use it as the blueprint as we are still trying to build South Africa.
Certainly, and we'll speak about the state South Africa is in. I know you don't want to go too much into detail, but you know, part of what was said speaks about who remains so faithful for 30 years. Having a president, an ANC president for over 30 years, it just speaks about the man that OR was and his dedication to the cause, especially during such a volatile time in South Africa.
I think there's also two ways of looking. Yes, who remains faithful for that long, and it is definitely down to OR's values and his integrity and courage of conviction when it came to, you know, fighting for the liberation of the country. But I think on the other hand, and it's the reason we're called the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Oliver wouldn't have been allowed to be Oliver had it not been for Adelaide, had it not been for her keeping down the home front and having multiple jobs and working multiple shifts daily as a nurse and opening their home in London to young activists coming, you know, from South Africa, from the rest of the world. I think it's very important to, yes, acknowledge his incredible values, but also the fact that without her, she wasn't just his wife, she wasn't just Oliver Tambo's wife, she was Adelaide Tambo in her own right, and the two could be as great as they were because of each other.
Certainly. Let's go back to the movie screening and the fact that it speaks about the jewel in our crown. Why was it so important to name the movie that?
The jewel in the crown is what Mandela referred to OR as in his speech at OR's funeral, which is on the 2nd of May 1993, and he spoke about, you know, no one can ever forget who OR is. He was the jewel in South Africa's crown. He was the cream of the crop, the best of the best, and we would not be South Africa without OR. And they were best friends. And they hadn't seen each other.
What a best friend to have.
I know. And a lot of people think there may have been like rivalry for leadership of the ANC. There wasn't. They were best friends. They complemented each other. They were in communication as much as they could be. And OR was, and it obviously speaks to his humility, he would sign documents as, you know, the acting president of the ANC, even though he was, because he was like, the president of the ANC, the elected president, is on Robben Island, and that is Nelson Mandela. But I'm here because I am in exile fighting for this movement while he can't be.
So OR was very important in introducing Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela to Nelson Mandela. He was a very good friend.
A bit of a matchmaker.
Very cute. Let's speak about the importance for the foundation to keep Oliver and Adelaide's legacy living on, especially in a time where South Africa is so volatile. You know, you spoke about the fact that many thought Nelson Mandela and Tambo were enemies, and you know, often we see that play out in the current ANC, where you have leaders fighting for positions and you don't have a unified ruling party. But why is it important for that legacy to live on and for that message to live on?
I think for the foundation, like I said, it's a blueprint. The country we live in now is, I think, very far removed from what OR dreamt of or hoped for us. And I think that using his values is a way for us to get back to the essence of who we are. And I don't think it has to be on a national scale or on an international scale. I think it's about especially for the foundation, every single South African knowing what his values are: humility, like I said, courage of conviction, servant leadership, integrity, honesty, you know, all those things. And then making it their own values personally in your own life, in your own community every day, and not straying from that anymore, going back to the drawing board of these incredible set of leaders that we do come from, and using that as we go forward. We're only, what, next year, 30 years into our democracy. We're still very young, but we can still learn from this incredible blueprint that has been left for us.
And that's the thing, it has been left for us, so we should be looking at that. I don't want, obviously, to put you in a difficult position to say, what would OR say in this day and age? Look what's happening with our ruling party, look what's happening. I mean, half of my bulletin this evening was about how many people have been murdered, children being, you know, mutilated. It's horrific. But I want to speak about the critical role he played in trying to have a free South Africa, because we're also leading up to Freedom Day, and many would say, are we even still free? Would Tambo think we're still free?
I think the more you learn about his values and his legacy, it's for all of us to infer that he wouldn't have been happy with the state of the nation. But I think it's more that he very much believed in collective leadership, and I think as we are coming up to, you know, the elections next year, it's interesting to see like new parties popping up, and now we're, you know, independent candidates and all these things. I think at the end of the day, what he wanted was a free and just democracy, and as long as that hasn't been reached, there's work to be done. But there's work to be done by every single one of us. It's not, we can no longer leave it to a few parties or a few individuals. It's actually up to every single South African to do their part in changing the reality for the better of the entire country.
Let's speak about the screening and the documentary. I can call it a documentary, right? Yes. So the choice of individuals that spoke in this documentary and why it was critical for them to speak, because I don't want to say they spoke on behalf of Tambo, but they obviously know the role he played, some of them having worked very closely with him.
Firstly, what's very wonderful and pretty unique about the documentary is that you hear Oliver's voice a lot, because Tembi Tambo, his daughter, had said to him, you have to document your life. Like, you have to write down your story. And he kept saying, I don't have time, I don't have time. And then one day she handed him a tape recorder and was like, if you don't have time to write, then at least every day try and, you know, just record yourself telling your story, and we can then do something with it. And a lot of that is in the documentary, his own voice telling his own story. But the voices in the documentary are firstly from all around the world, because one thing OR did really well was manage to garner incredible international support to help the ANC liberate the country. So there's wonderful voices from all around the world, from ambassadors to prime ministers to freedom fighters from everywhere. And I think it speaks to the caliber of who he was. There's a bit in the movie where Ambassador Lindiwe Mabuza says he was a statesman, he was a diplomat, and he may not have ever been the head of the country, but he was the de facto head of the majority of this country.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So what can we expect on Monday?
So on Monday, we have this incredible film screening. The film is produced by OR's son, Dali Tambo, and directed by him, but also with Paulo Jordan, and a lot of historical references from OR's biographer, Luli Kalinikos. And it's produced by Kamsila Naidu, who's also a very renowned producer. So we're going to have the screening of that, and after that there'll be a conversation. OR was a massive fan of collaboration, so we're having an intergenerational discussion between former Justice of the Concourt, Albie Sachs, and a young activist, Sarah Makwebo, just chatting about OR's legacy. How does it apply in 2023? Maybe you can come and ask that question.
Hopefully I get an answer, because you are very wary about that.
So they're going to have a discussion about how it pertains. Is it still relevant, this legacy? How do we use it? But also there's a home in Ekurhuleni that was very close to Adelaide Tambo's heart. It's a centre for the elderly that their funding has just been cut. So true to form, I mean, we're the foundation, we do work in their honour, but we also do work using their values as our values, and we couldn't have an event without helping this centre that was so near and dear to both of the Tambo's hearts. So we're collecting non-perishable food for the home and donations for this home. Wonderful gogos and grandpas, and they need our help. And like I said, it's gotten to the stage where it's really up to every South African to help each other. So
those who want to help, where should they drop that off?
It's at the wonderful partners at the event is the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and also the Ora Tambo School for Leadership. So the event is at the foundation in Dunkeld, and that's where we'll be collecting the food.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Just lastly, what lessons do you hope people take from this documentary, especially young people? As I mentioned, the country is in complete distress. You know, we're all trying to scramble, like we're all in survival mode, basically. And there's a lot going on, and we often look up to leaders and we see how they behave and the conduct, and we think, okay, is this the right way to go? But this documentary obviously embodies a man that was a leader, that was at the forefront of being so critical. I think the one person said, a man of peace, not a man of war, a brilliant mind. And Africa felt proud whenever he spoke up. So what should people take from this documentary, especially young people?
A few years ago, we did a conference with, I think, about 350 young people from age, I think, 16 to 18. And it was about OR and trying to pass on this legacy to young people, because that is who needs to know about OR. It's not just an airport, it's, you know, there's an actual person with an incredible legacy behind it. And I remember so many of these high schoolers saying, when they're old enough, they'll leave the country because, you know, going into politics just isn't an option, because politics means corruption. And it was this fascinating day spent with all these workshops and panel discussions with Edwin Cameron and Albie Sachs and Lindiwe Mabuza and Brigalia Bam, all these incredible older South Africans in conversation with all these younger South Africans, firstly defining politics and what it means to be a leader, but also just talking about how we can't all leave. If everyone leaves, who stays and fights? Who fights for the future of this country that we're trying to leave to younger people? And I think that's what I want people to take away, that we can't all leave. We shouldn't all leave. We need to stay and fight for this democracy that was so hard won, but that we all are still trying to keep happy and healthy and safe and liberated for many more decades to come. So I think, having watched the movie on Monday, I want people to walk away, I think, with renewed hope, in that it is attainable, but also a bit of self-hope that it is up to me to change South Africa.
And we do it together, right? Yeah. Just lastly, sorry, what happens on Monday? Is it open to the public? What's the process?
Yes, the seats are very limited. I mean, it's a foundation, it's not a stadium, sadly. But if you RSVP to info@tambofoundation.org.za, you can book your seat and then join us.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We do appreciate it, and we wish you all the best. And I hope people come through and obviously drop off those perishables that are in need. Thank you. Thanks once again. That's the acting CEO of the Oliver and Adelaide Tambo Foundation, Natasha Allie.